Our eyes have been trained since childhood to perceive the ancient world as primitive, limited in its instruments, submerged in mythology, and wholly bereft of anything we might recognize as technology. Yet this perception is nothing more than a thick crust concealing beneath it an entirely different reality, a reality that whispers, and at times cries out, that the civilizations of the past possessed sophisticated technological knowledge, that their cities were not drowned in darkness as we have been led to believe, but were illuminated, pulsing with energy, and connected through intricate networks of scientific understanding of nature and its hidden forces. The silent ruins, the recurring symbols, the architectural structures that defy conventional interpretation, all point toward a world that comprehended electricity, energy, vibration, and the ether itself, not as abstract theoretical concepts, but as forces harnessed within the rhythms of daily life, a self-contained system of stone pillars and lithic antennae and temples whose engineering precision cannot be explained except through an advanced mastery of energy and electromagnetic fields. All of these stand as testaments to a civilization whose story was meticulously rewritten after its fall. The alchemical symbol for Mercury is said to trace its origins to the caduceus, an emblem visible throughout the remnants of the ancient world, yet one that has since been seized by adversarial hands and emblazoned upon many a distinguished insignia. It was adopted by the corrupted centralized medical industries that have committed and continue to commit mass crimes against humanity. It is no mere coincidence that Mercury itself, the very element the symbol represents, is injected into human bodies today through vaccines, with the deliberate purpose of disrupting the methylation cycle, a vital biological pathway within the body's cells, dependent upon precise and delicate chemical reactions. It is a foundational process essential to human health, governing an enormous range of critical physiological functions. Its disruption gives rise to the spread of autism and neurological disorders afflicting the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, impairing movement, consciousness, memory, equilibrium, and emotional regulation, among them Alzheimer's disease, epilepsy, and multiple sclerosis. Beyond these, it precipitates metabolic disorders, diseases that compromise the body's metabolic processes, its capacity to convert food into energy and synthesize vital biological compounds, including diabetes, obesity, and thyroid dysfunction. The caduceus reveals with striking clarity how Greco-Roman mythology has served the adversary as an instrument of systematic deception. In Roman mythology, the staff of the caduceus was carried in the left hand of the god Mercury, deity of financial gain, commerce, communication, and messages. In Greek mythology, it was borne by the god Hermes, patron of travelers and merchants alike. These fabricated mythologies afforded the adversary the means to conceal the true relationship between the caduceus and the element of Mercury, and to conduct his diseased rituals of deception in broad daylight by binding his medical industry to the god of financial gain and commerce. As Fulcanelli wrote, the serpent signifies the corrosive and dissolving nature of Mercury. This reptile is the image of Mercury in its primal state. The golden staff is the corporeal sulfur added unto it, that is, the philosophical Mercury, and the caduceus is its symbol. The caduceus does not merely symbolize the mercury elixir essential for the transmission of electromagnetic energy. The two entwined serpents, coiling into a helical spiral, embody the path of energy and vortex, while the staff itself gestures toward gold and sulfur, evoking, too, the very form of antennae. And just as mythology conceals truth in plain sight, the wings here incarnate communication, transmission, messages, and signals flowing between antennae within the electromagnetic network, as well as the communion between those antennae and the ether itself. For the Roman god Mercury was known as the messenger of the gods. And there it hides, in full view, before our very eyes. In alchemical art and illustration, we behold the eagle and the lion, the symbol of the caduceus, and those same geometric forms and structures that once crowned the summits of ancient world buildings. And yet it remains difficult to conceive of that energy network, and still more difficult to fathom the magnitude of effort required to dismantle all its engines, to destroy and efface a sufficient portion of the ancient world's landmarks, and then to undertake the wholesale rewriting of history so as to guarantee the success of that great reconstruction. Yet what we observe in the photographs and images of the 19th century and the early 20th is nothing more than the final stages of that reconstruction. There existed a transitional phase, and as with any transitional phase, certain technologies of the ancient world that they sought to suppress continued to be employed. As I have said before, the adversary is indolent. He ought to have destroyed those photographs and film reels, but mercifully for us, he did not. Behold how they possess the technology to construct moving pedestrian walkways. But that is not all. Behold, too, the cities ablaze with electric light. How did they achieve this in the closing years of the 19th century and the dawning years of the 20th? It is the ancient world of the future, retreated into our new world, the undeveloped one. Behold as well the towering spires that rose at the heart of those cities, as though they were colossal antennae transmitting and receiving energy. How do they operate those vast machines, without noise, without smoke ascending from chimneys? When one contemplates these testimonies, one comes to understand that what we behold in those ancient images is not merely the remnants of a bygone era, but the vestiges of an advanced world whose history was deliberately silenced until it appeared to us as though it had never existed at all. Yet this is not all. Certain peculiar apparatuses discovered within those cities suggest that their inhabitants wielded mastery over energy and magnetic fields. Waters flowed through channels without any visible pumps. Illumination burned steadily and without the need for conventional fuel, as though nature itself labored in their service. All of this evidence compels us to ask, how did this advanced world so suddenly recede, to persist as nothing more than a phantom haunting the margins of history? To contemplate these truths is to open a window onto an ancient world we no longer recognize, a world in which science and civilization surpass the very boundaries of what we today consider possible. Most of these images were captured during the World's Fairs of the 19th century and the early 20th, and any electrician would confirm the impossibility of achieving such a scale and magnitude of illumination in that era. At the very least, the laying of a wire network of such complexity would have constituted a logistical nightmare. Yet they had no need of any intricate web of cables, did they? And how did they come to possess moving walkways in that same period? These very technologies appear again in the amusement parks of the United States in the early 20th century, known then as electric gardens. These moving walkways formed part of an integrated conveyance system that transported visitors with effortless fluidity between the various reaches of the grounds, sparing them the labor of lengthy walks, as though they were living the experience of traveling through a world yet to come. Nor were the walkways the extent of it. The electric gardens encompassed breathtaking illuminated spectacles and sophisticated water systems of remarkable ingenuity. All of this confirms that the technologies still in use during the transitional phase were not the exclusive province of great cities. They had spread, too, into the realm of leisure and entertainment. Indeed, we find references to electricity everywhere among the vestiges of repurposed knowledge inherited from the ancient world. And even in that transitional phase of the Great Reconstruction, the cities appeared magnificent and resplendent, despite the fact that most of their water networks had already been demolished. Imagine, then, what they had once been capable of achieving. For these photographs and film reels point to the existence of a sophisticated control network, as though the city itself were a living organism, autonomously distributing energy, orchestrating the movement of its inhabitants and vehicles without external intervention. Returning to the symbols, many of the great emblems we recognize today can be traced in their origins back to Mercury, the very element that rendered the ancient electromagnetic and technological world possible. It is particularly striking that Fulcanelli, in his reading of the figure of Phosphorus, known also as Saint Christopher, as a mercurial bearer, reaches the apex of his Masonic deception and half-truths. He opens by speaking of the belt of Phosphorus as depicted by the painter Julien de Champagne, whose portrait of Phosphorus hangs in the mansion of Jean Lamans, which Fulcanelli described as one of the most beautiful and rare of philosophical houses. The painting depicts Phosphorus wearing a broad belt embroidered with intersecting lines. It is worth noting that none of the other celebrated artistic renderings of Phosphorus depict him wearing this belt. Fulcanelli declares that the painter surpassed all his contemporaries, for the Hermetic scholar who commissioned the work breathed inspiration into him, such that he portrayed Phosphorus bound by a broad belt at the level of his abdomen. Fulcanelli affirmed that it is precisely this belt which bestows upon Saint Christopher his true esoteric character. Attend with the closest of attention to what he says next. According to certain documents preserved in the archives of the Lalemant Mansion, Jean Lalemant was affiliated with the alchemical brotherhood of the Knights of the Round Table, a clandestine fraternity through which generations of sages and adepts of the occult sciences had passed in succession, devoted to the preservation of an ancient knowledge whose roots extended into ages predating recorded history. Its members held that access to wisdom was granted only to those capable of purifying the soul and comprehending the language of the four elements and the pathways of cosmic energy. It is said that Lalemant received their teachings within a hidden cell situated beneath ancient ruins, where spiritual exercises and alchemical experiments were conducted with a precision resembling the rites of temples. Those who belonged to this brotherhood regarded themselves as custodians of a heritage on the verge of extinction, and so they labored tirelessly to transmit it in secrecy, safeguarding a chain of knowledge they claimed to bind man to the cosmos. The text reads, "What we shall say here cannot be taught." The belt of Phosphorus is a mark known to all philosophers, being the outward sign that denotes the supreme essential purity of their mercurial matter, the sign which the ancient author calls the seal of Hermes, the star of the Magi Ursa Minor, the constellation in which the pole star resides. At first glance, the comparison between the belt of Phosphorus and the constellation of the Bear near the pole star, known as Ursa Major, or the Great Plough, appears to carry no evident meaning. What then does Fulcanelli intend? Is it mere obscure rambling from an obsessed Freemason? Or are we missing a vital thread in this labyrinthine enigma? Yet if one begins to trace the engraving upon the belt, another form swiftly emerges within it, concealed yet strangely familiar. And when the constellation of Ursa Major is observed across the four seasons throughout the year, it becomes apparent that it traces this very same pattern. It is the symbol of the hooked cross, the swastika, a symbol that has become, in the modern imagination, synonymous with evil and darkness. Yet what few know is that this symbol, according to the official historical record, was once among the most widely used emblems across the breadth of human history and civilization. It holds a position of sacred significance in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. It was employed by the peoples known as the ancient Greeks and Romans, by the Druids, the Celts, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, and the early Christians, among many others. Thus we find it engraved in mosaic, carved into rock-hewn churches, adorning bracelets and rose windows and crosses, imprinted upon pottery, garments, and flags, present everywhere, across time and across cultures. So pervasive was its association with energy that power companies in Sweden and Norway in the late 19th and early 20th centuries adopted this very symbol to designate their electrical and hydroelectric power stations. Such a connection cannot, under any circumstances, be attributed to mere coincidence. Were we to contemplate the astronomical observations carried out by the ancients, we would discover that this symbol was no mere decorative motif. It was treated as a key to understanding the nature of the energy flowing through heaven and earth. The constellation of Ursa Major, by virtue of the positions of its stars and the arc of its motion, was regarded by many peoples as an indicator of the equilibrium of cosmic forces and as a measure by which to reckon the timing of spiritual rites, agricultural labors, and maritime navigation. As the ages passed, this symbol came to permeate manuscripts, architecture, and works of art, as though its recurring presence were a signal pointing toward a single shared knowledge that had migrated between civilizations, a knowledge whose contours remained alive well into the age of the Industrial Revolution. What renders the matter stranger still is that the recurring use of this symbol in modern energy installations creates a powerful impression that it served the very same function in antiquity, and that its connection to electromagnetic forces is no superstition, but a distant echo of a science long concealed from human sight. And since the task of erasing memory and history is neither simple nor easily accomplished, demanding, as it does, the labor of ages, this symbol stands, among all symbols, as the one upon which the adversary expended the greatest effort in corruption and disfigurement. Not solely on account of its now-forgotten bond with electromagnetism, but also because, as Fulcanelli intimates, it was bound to the role of Mercury within the energy network of the ancient world. Just as the entwined serpents of the caduceus trace a helical motion, the symbol of the hooked cross depicts the vortex generated by Mercury when placed within an electromagnetic field. It represents yet another vortex, that which lies beneath the pole star at the axis of the Earth, deliberately concealed by the scientific establishment despite having been documented by cartographers and others in the maps of the 16th and 17th centuries and in the ancient books. Is the vortex surrounding the black rock Rupes Nigra, known also at times as Mount Meru, a mountain that appears in Hindu, Tibetan, and Buddhist traditions, typically depicted as the center of the world or the axis of the cosmos, situated in what is called the North Pole. And by a remarkable irony, scientists have recently discovered the existence of vast natural reservoirs of mercury beneath the Arctic, and they profess to be troubled by the prospect of their thawing and the poisoning it might release. Of course they are troubled. Is this yet another mockery on their part, or are there truly immense quantities of mercury in the far north? This discovery has provoked wide-ranging debate as to whether mercury, long portrayed as a hazardous substance in modern scientific discourse, may possess a role far greater and more ancient than has ever been publicly acknowledged. Some suggest that these colossal reserves did not arise by chance, but may be remnants of geological systems or ancient technologies that engaged with mercury as a vital energetic substance. Others hold that this revelation, at this precise moment, is no mere natural occurrence, but a signal of a cosmic cycle in which elements once known to the ancients are returning to prominence once more. We shall return to this subject in due course, for noble metals and their original locations upon the earth are a matter of the gravest consequence, and this is what the people of the ancient world knew. They knew the earth upon which they lived more intimately than any who came after them. They knew that alchemical metals, gold, iron, copper, mercury, and others could be refined by methods that granted them access to ethereal electromagnetic energy. They knew that Phosphorus, that is, the alchemical mercury, was capable of bearing the Christ, or the alchemical gold, and carrying it unto mankind. And it is no coincidence that the path by which Phosphorus bore the Christ was through the river, through water, For the legend of Ophrys is a symbolic embodiment, a complete metaphor for the energy system of the ancient world. Now, I sense that you wish to ask about the maps, about Mercator and others. For if history has been falsified, symbols stripped of their meanings, and lies drawn like a veil across the truth, then how can we place any trust in the ancient maps? How do we know that Hyperborea is a real place, that kingdom said to lie far in the north, appearing in ancient Greek mythology as a land of perpetual light, unending spring, peace, and abundance, inhabited by a people who were near immortal and lived in happiness, free from disease? Some researchers connect it to the inner earth of hollow earth theory or to advanced ancient civilizations. This is, without question, a matter of profound importance. And regrettably, we cannot trust the maps, and I shall tell you why. For the time has come to speak of the clocks. There is another map, hidden and forgotten since a time beyond reckoning, the oldest of all maps. It is by no means complete, but it is all that we possess. Come, the hour has arrived to lift yet another veil.